Welcome, foolish mortals.
Welcome back to my cozy little corner of the internet. Today's video, I thought it would be fun to talk about my 20 favourite movies of all time. Seemingly fitting, as of course I'm talking about films on this channel, so it's only fair that I get to talk about my favourites. But also for me to have a taste of my own medicine and for you to get to know me better, because every person I ever meet, I interrogate them with the "what's your favourite film?" question, because it tells me everything I need to know about you. And this list, I hope, will tell you everything that you need to know about me. I feel like it perfectly encapsulates who I am as a person and what I love and what I stand for. So, without further ado. At number 20, I have The Departed, of course directed by Martin Scorsese. This was the first Scorsese movie I'd ever seen, and I think that's why I hold it in such high regard. I do think that there are films in his catalogue that are far more vibrant. I mean, Casino and The Irishman and Goodfellas. And even though The Departed is slick and has great performances, I just think sometimes it gets missed out and people don't recognise it as such a great film, even though it is one. You have DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Martin Sheen, Mark Wahlberg, Alec Baldwin, Vera Farmiga, and of course Darling Jack. And if I wasn't such a sucker for him in rom-coms, this probably would be my favourite Nicholson performance, just because it's so nuanced. But the reason why this film is on the list is because it's probably the most perfect example I've ever seen of unravelling storytelling. It's just done so well. All of the stories are so intricately intertwined in one another, it's marvellous. At number 19, I have Beetlejuice. I have a love-hate relationship with Burton. I've said this before in previous videos that I think Ed Wood is his Vertigo and Beetlejuice is his Psycho. It's going to be the film that he's remembered for, and rightly so, because it's fantastic, but Ed Wood was not, like Vertigo, received critically very well at the time, even though I think it's a much better film because it's Burton at his peak and it's refined. But Beetlejuice is so crass and brash and crude, and it has all of those colourful, rough edges that just make it so lovable. And if you hadn't already guessed, of course I'm a Libra. So it reminds me of my favourite time of year, and I love all the special effects in this film. At number 18, I have The Shining, of course directed by Stanley Kubrick. This film is, yes, of course, brimming with great performances. I mean, Jack is amazing. It's probably one of the most notable from his career, and Shelley Duvall too. But this film is so tantalising visually. It's so vibrant, and it's directed within an inch of its life. It's directed to perfection. And if Kubrick were to ever make it again, I mean, he wouldn't because he's dead, but if he did whilst he was still alive, it wouldn't be the same as it was, because that's how precise and perfect it is. I don't know if it's just because I've seen this movie so many times, but it feels warm and cosy and reliable, even though it keeps me guessing. Every time I watch this film, I see something different that I didn't see before, and that's such a gift. It doesn't happen very often in cinema. Number 17 is Mamma Mia. I have Donna Sheridan earrings in today, of course, for the occasion. There's nothing to note about this film. I mean, it's a well-made film, but there's nothing to note about it from a directorial point of view. I just think it's so much fun. It fills me with glee. I love ABBA and I love Meryl, and this is probably the closest we're ever going to get to Meryl being Meryl. And of course you have the crossover that I never knew I needed of Mark Darcy and James Bond. So, number 16 is Vertigo, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Again, a film directed to perfection. This film is the epitome of Hollywood glamour, and I'm so fond of Jimmy Stewart. It's such a beautiful story, told so well. Then taking a 180, I then have Hairspray. This is one of those films that made me want to become an actor. A modern classic with an amazing cast, and of course it's set in the 60s, what more could you want? Bridget Jones's Diary is next. Now I would be lying if I made a favourite film list and I didn't put this on here. I know it word for word, literally verbatim. When you're sad, there is no thing better than Hugh Grant's fluff, a bottle of wine, and Bridget Jones. Number 13 is Hannah and Her Sisters, of course directed by Woody Allen. I've always been very vocal and open about my adoration for Woody, and this video is going to be no exception. This film is so dreamy and romantic, yet it's aggressively real under all its romanticism and soft words and dreamy aesthetic. And Woody is so lovable as a hypochondriac. Number 16 is Your Girl is Lovely Hubble. The Way We Were, directed by Sydney Pollack, is the most bitter tale in love, and it's the OG before Annie Hall and La La Land. It's the, What If We Made It film. Barbra Streisand is such a riveting lead. I think she speaks to probably every woman that's ever been in love. The Way We Were is directed by Sydney Pollack. Of course, so it's bewitching in colour palette and in timing. 11 is Something's Gotta Give, directed by Nancy Meyers. This film is two of my favourite people to ever have existed on the planet Earth, two of my heroes together in a film at the height of their crafts and the peak of their careers, just having fun with one another in a serene, aesthetically pleasing kitchen. It's something you didn't know about Nancy Meyers is she began as a screenwriter, and I think she really shows off her chops here. It's such a gorgeous script. Beginning the top 10 is Milos Forman's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. A vivid portrait of its time, and I didn't talk about it in the last video because I didn't want to waffle on, but this film genuinely changed my life the first time I ever watched it. I completely altered my perspective on the world and my surroundings. It's really thoughtful and carried out with so much intent, and it's fair to its subject matter. I can't quite find the right words to explain it, but watching Cuckoo's Nest feels like a solitary experience every time you watch it. It really grounds your sense of self, and you learn something new every time. Something new about yourself, I mean. Number 9 is The Hours, directed by Stephen Daldry. No one ever talks about this film, and it genuinely is 3 of the most exquisite performances ever given on screen. I love Meryl and I love Julianne Moore, but Nicole Kidman really steals the show here. Of course, she won an Oscar for her performance as Virginia Woolf. The first time I ever watched this film, it made me cry like a baby, and it makes me cry like a baby since. Daldry's colour palette is quite bleak and muted, but there are some scenes where it's so vibrant and colourful. Those shots remain with you forever. This film has never ever ever left me. I think there's so much slack for this. At number 8 is Crimson Peak, directed by Guillermo del Toro. A seducing tale of love, death and passion, and all that intertwines within it. I was there on opening night when this film got released. I am such a big Tom Hiddleston fan, or I was, and not so much anymore. I definitely grew out of that one. From nice charming boys to naughty Americans. I have loved this film ever since I laid eyes on it. I think it's gorgeous, and I think it's an underrated masterpiece by a delectable director. Crimson Peak was integral to my understanding of love and romance and fiction in my teenage years, and I owe so much to it. Jurassic Park Lost World is next, directed by Steven Spielberg. I have no words for this film other than Jeff and dinosaurs. That's it, really. I love the second installment because it feels cohesive to Jurassic Park, because it's the only film where Spielberg is still in charge. I love Ian Malcolm, and I love the kind of bitter, angry and resentful Malcolm that they give in this film. But other than the animatronics, there isn't much to note about this film cinematically. Lots of people hate it because it's got lots of plot holes, which I totally get, but I love it. Number 6 is The Royal Tenenbaums, directed by Wes Anderson. This has creeped its way up into my list quite recently. I treated myself with my partner. We went to go and watch it at the Prince Charles Cinema in London on 35mm, and it was one of the most magical experiences of my life. I had seen it before a handful of times, and I'd always really loved it and really understood it and got it. It tickles my pickles in all of my senses of humour. But when I watched it in 35mm, it was like a religious experience. Anderson is so dry, like in contrast to such a bright colour palette. It's a faultless picture in his catalogue without all of the kind of snobbiness of his later pictures and the roughness of the ones previous to Tenenbaums. Again, clever and executed to perfection within an inch of its life. Next is The Fly, directed by David Cronenberg. The practical effects, the acting, the soundtrack, so crazily underrated. It's one of those pictures where its concept just, like, you never forget it. It's a terrifying film with so much love and understanding of its characters. And yes, naked Jeff Goldblum. Manhattan by Woody Allen. I cannot express to you the euphoria I felt the first time I ever watched Manhattan. I'd never seen a Woody movie before, and it was the first one I'd ever seen, and I remember I swayed towards it because I wanted to watch it for Diane Keaton and Meryl Streep. And from the minute it began to the minute it ended, and then when it had finished, I'd never felt so seen, heard and understood in my life. And I thought I was thinking to myself, I finally found my thing. Manhattan is witty and self-righteous in Woody's little black and white realm. The best thing about Woody is that he trusts his audience like no other director does, and if you get it and if you understand it, you immediately are welcomed into his little world with quirky niche references and jokes and unforeseen romantic circumstances that you just accept and go along with. Everything feels so possible in Woody's movies. You think I don't know anything pre-Paul McCartney or something? It's not really a number 1, 2 and 3. I do love all of these movies equally. Could not get my words out then. Number 3 is The First Flies Club, which has one of the best endings in history. I will never get tired of this movie ever. It's 3 of my favourite actresses ever in one film, in like an empowering flick. Number 2 is Annie Hall, which I just think is one of the greatest films ever made. It's perfect. I've said that a lot today. It genuinely is perfect. It's perfect to me. Every person that loves film, or just in general, every person has that one film that changes them for life, changes them forever. Annie Hall was mine. Dressed like Woody Allen for a solid 3 years of my life. Still dressed like Woody Allen, but not to that extent. I began wearing ties and suits and made me into the woman I am today. Annie Hall is such a love letter to women, especially from a male perspective, and I don't think anybody ever directs women with so much love than Woody does. And in every single one of his films, the women are always intelligently or morally superior to the male character, every male character in the film, and you're always left remembering the female lead in every single one of his movies. And Annie Hall is a perfect example of that. Someone who has always felt non-sexy to men. Annie Hall makes me feel very sexy, and I owe a lot to Woody. My number 1 is Jurassic Park, of course directed by Steven Spielberg. I love dinosaurs, I love puppets, I love special effects, I love Jeff Goldblum, and I do love Steven Spielberg. Everything about Jurassic Park makes me feel like I'm 10, and I think anybody who enjoys this movie feels the same way. It really makes you feel like a kid again. Of course, an impeccable example in great filmmaking, but it's also a great adaptation of a mediocre novel. It fills in all the blanks of imagination and just proves why cinema is magical cinema. Bring it back. Not Jurassic Park, please no more Jurassic Park. I mean, bring back magical cinema, please.